He's come from a 2-bedroom house to being the biggest star on the planet. And then he gets to meet Jordan Chandler. They develop this friendship, but it starts raising questions because during this time, Jordan is sharing a room with Michael, sometimes even a bed.
They talk about this horrific stuff that's happened all while there is a cardboard cutout of Peter Pan on the bottom of the bed.
Watching all of this unfold is Jordan's father, Evan Chandler. On one hand, he's raising concerns, but on the other hand, he's not stopping the relationship. He says that Jackson is an evil guy, and I have the evidence to prove it. Michael responds publicly, denies everything, but the pressure is building. There isn't just a criminal case, there's now also a civil case against him. In March 2009, Jackson arrives for the This Is It tour. When he finally steps onto the stage, he looks quite fragile. Then the attention turns to Jackson's personal doctor, Conrad Murray, and his income depends on Jackson performing.
Oh, so mad.
Murray does not tell paramedics about the propofol he's been giving Michael, so the most famous person in the world can get some sleep. Murray is frantic. They continue to try and resuscitate him, but at 2:26 p.m. on June the 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson is pronounced dead. Welcome to The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I'm your ringmaster for this episode, Adam Cox.
And I'm Kyle Risi, your commissioner for controlled alarm here at the Compendium Circus.
Okay, go on then. Carry on. Let's give you your little segment for the show.
Basically, my role is to ensure that all panic remains professional, measured, and at the appropriate level suited to the situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone's too hysterical, you're like, no, bring it down a notch.
Exactly. We are not here to eliminate fear. We are here to manage it, document it, catalogue it even. But most importantly, make sure nobody starts screaming before the correct forms have been filled out.
So as soon as someone goes, like they take that inhaler breath, you're like, nope.
Yeah, exactly. But basically this all started because a junior staff member shouted, "Everybody stay calm!" Which of course, as you can imagine, immediately causes panic because that phrase is never used in a calm situation.
No.
Exactly. And then within 90 seconds, 2 jugglers, they were crying. One child was holding a fire bucket for emotional support. And the strong man had barricaded himself in the merch kiosk. So this is why they have me.
Okay. So guys, if you are new to the show and you want to support us, then the absolute best way is to join us over on Patreon. You can get access to exclusive perks. It's completely free, and you get next week's episode 7 days early.
And for as little as $5 a month, you can become a fellow freak of the show, which will unlock our entire back catalogue, including all of our classic, old vintage style compendium episodes.
But Kyle, of course, the main reason people join our circus, become a certified freak or a big top tier member, is to get access to our exclusive compendium keychain.
And if you don't know that by now, what's happening?
Yeah,
everyone knows about the crotch dangler.
Yeah, right now you've got a naked crotch and we want to fix that.
Yes, that's it. And lastly, guys, please follow us on your favorite podcasting app and leave us a review. Your support really genuinely does so much to support the show and helps other people find us.
But that's enough of the housekeeping, because Kyle, today on the Compendium, we're diving back into an assembly of allegations, courtrooms, and a legacy that divides opinion.
Ooh, I have no idea what this is about.
Yes, you do. We said we were going to do a second.
Without my authority. Yeah, so this is the second part of Michael Jackson, huh?
Yes, our Michael Jackson epic. This is part 2, testimonies, trials, and controversy.
Ooh, all the good stuff, right? All the stuff that we want to know about. I really enjoyed finding out about Michael Jackson's rise because it was the Michael Jackson that I remember growing up, right? Incredible personality. What I didn't really know too much about was the Jackson 5 stuff, because of course that became before I was born. But like, it was so nice to like fill in the gaps, but also to see how a lot of that pain and childhood trauma shaped him into the man who he would become, which I think is safe to say, to sum up, a very bruised, broken human being that was still desperate to cling on to his childhood.
That's right, yeah. In part 1, we started our story with Michael Jackson, the story that everyone agrees on. But as we get into part 2, this is where there are firmly two camps. Is Michael Jackson innocent, or is there truth to the allegations that surround him? So let's just reset where we are, because up to this point, Michael Jackson is untouchable. He's come from a 2-bedroom house in Gary to the biggest star on the planet. The Motown years, the solo career, Thriller, the moonwalk, a level of fame that doesn't really exist before him. But underneath that all, there are already signs that things aren't normal. A childhood that never really happened, a man trying to hold on to it, and by the late 80s and into the early 90s, Michael isn't just performing, he's managing pain, physical and something deeper. He's got injuries from the Pepsi commercial.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's got this insomnia that doesn't go away. And so treatment begins, he sees doctors, he gets medication, things to help him sleep, to recover, to keep him going. And then, of course, there's Neverland, this place where children are invited into his world to be kids. There's sleepovers, but it's a lifestyle that raises questions long before allegations. And then that broken down car incident where he gets to meet the Chandlers.
So that's kind of like the thing that kicks off all of the sexual abuse allegations against him throughout the 90s, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And at first, it seems pretty harmless, their relationship, because this family is invited to stay with Michael Jackson, and it seems like something you wouldn't turn down, right?
No, why would you? It's magical. He's the biggest pop star in the world.
Yeah. And they develop this friendship, and then there's these trips. They go to Netherlands to visit him. There's trips to Las Vegas, Paris, Morocco. And from the outside, it looks like a really close unit. But it starts raising questions because during this time, Jordan is staying at Neverland. He's sleeping there and he's traveling with Jackson, and he's sharing a room with him, sometimes even a bed. Now, Jackson would later say this was all innocent, like a sleepover, and his defenders would argue that's exactly how they saw it. But even at the time, not everyone agreed, because watching all of this unfold is Jordan's father, Evan Chandler.
And he's his biological father, right? He doesn't live with them. So the fact that his mother, June, and I'm assuming it's his stepfather, is that right?
Yeah.
Is like giving him access to Michael Jackson, essentially. He's sitting there on the side going, I don't want this.
Yeah, it makes sense, because from his perspective, his son is being pulled into someone else's world, but it's a world that he doesn't control, and it appears that he's actually very concerned for the well-being of his son.
Yeah, and out of interest, you said at the end of the last show, like out of nowhere, Jordan admitted that Michael Jackson had molested him, and that came after the father had already raised his concerns about why his son was going to see Michael Jackson. Do you think this could have been a coerced admittance?
Well, that's exactly where we're picking up the story today.
Oh, interesting.
So Jordan's just made that huge revelation.
What does he say out of interest? Do you know?
I don't know the exact words, but he is asked, did Michael abuse him? And he agrees to it. So at this point, I think we need to understand the kind of guy who Evan Chandler is. Because on paper, he's a dentist, he's successful, he's well connected. He's the kind of guy that has access to these celebrity clients, one of which is the late Carrie Fisher. Mm-hmm. She would describe him as a dentist to the stars.
I've seen a lot of cavities. I've seen a lot of famous cavities.
Yeah. But when you dig a bit deeper, in her memoir, in fact, she describes something different. He would arrange appointments that weren't really about dentistry. And according to her, Dr. Chandler wasn't just treating patients. In fact, she says he's less like a dentist and more like a dealer.
What way? Giving them like laughing gas?
I think drugs, I'm guessing not like party drugs, but drugs that would use to treat pain.
Interesting.
And he would reveal to her, in fact, that he was suspicious of Michael Jackson, yet he still allowed and even encouraged his son to spend time with him, which is where things start to feel inconsistent, because on one hand, he's raising concerns, but on the other hand, he's not stopping the relationship. And behind the scenes, those concerns don't stay private, because he starts talking to multiple people, not just Carrie Fisher, including one meeting in July at Jordan's mother's partner, David Schwartz's office, the breakdown place. And what he doesn't know is that his conversation is being recorded, and what comes out of it doesn't sound like concern. He says that, and this is when he's referring to Michael, he will not believe what is going to happen to him. Beyond his worst nightmares, he will not sell one more record. Jackson is an evil guy. He's worse than that, and I have the evidence to prove it.
I mean, that's really interesting because what you're suggesting there is that he's going out to get him. But what's really important here is what's come first. Has his son at this point admitted that he has been molested and therefore he's saying this at that point? Or is he revealing his plan that he's going to get his son to say that he was molested? Do we know the timeline and the order of these different things?
So he doesn't, in this conversation, reveal anything about the son. I think he shared concerns about the son, but he's not saying what he's actually going to do.
Yeah, it's such a flip, isn't it? It could go one way or the other. What is your take on it?
I think the fact he actually goes on to say that June will lose custody and Michael's career will be over, I just think at this point in time, like, what is his intention? Because at one point he's asked a simple question, how does any of this help Jordan? And apparently he says something like, oh, that's irrelevant.
And it helps Jordan because if there is a settlement, it helps Jordan a lot.
So I can understand if he was concerned about his son and he wanted to bring justice because Michael Jackson had hurt his son. I can get all that. But why would you allow your son still to be in the presence of Michael, whether you could prove the abuse or not?
Very true.
And that doesn't sound to me like you're putting the safety of your son first.
Oh, absolutely not. And two things could be true. One thing could be that, yes, his son is being molested, and yet he sees this as a payday. It is very interesting, but yeah, it doesn't seem like he has any concern for his son.
Yes, that's the main thing I get from this guy. Because let's take a look at Jordan's actual confession. It was in August in 1993 during a dental visit to his dad. And Evan Chandler, during a treatment, administers a drug called sodium amytal, which is sometimes called a truth serum. But in reality, it doesn't reveal truth. It just lowers kind of resistance.
Sure, and you're probably still out of it as well, right? You're not very lucid. And so there's a chance that you could hallucinate.
And you can be, well, highly suggestible, which is why statements made under it aren't admissible in court.
Fine.
And under that influence, his son is asked that question, has Michael been inappropriate or abusing him? And he responds, yes. And that's what triggers the whole next set of events. Because from there, it doesn't go straight to the police. In fact, Evan Chandler seeks money from Michael Jackson and his team. Allegedly, it's around $20 million. And some say that it was because Evan Chandler wanted a deal for film projects and screenplays because he could see himself as a bit of a screenwriter in Hollywood.
Oh, interesting.
Not confirmed, allegedly, but that's what some people speculate why he was after this money.
Yeah, we just need an umbrella term for this whole episode. Allegedly, just in case we forget to say it in certain places.
Yes, maybe we'll just put that in the title.
Yeah, allegedly. Just call it allegedly.
And also because at the time, Sony had backed Michael Jackson with tens of millions to launch a production company. Some people believe that Evan Chandler was trying to get close enough to get involved with that. But that's just one version of events, and people can clearly just jump on the conspiracy wagon.
I think what we're establishing here is that there is very clearly a motivation to bend the truth
and extort Michael Jackson.
And yes. And again, that doesn't prove that's exactly what he did, but it shows that that's what makes it so difficult, right?
Well, the fact that he goes to Michael Jackson and his team first, and they spend a couple of weeks going back and forth trying to come to a settlement or some kind of arrangement, but they don't give in because they're like, yeah, this is extortion. And so is it the father trying to build a case to prove Michael's guilty? He would have offered me money. Or is he just trying to maximize leverage? Because it's a couple of weeks later that Jordan Chandler goes to a psychiatrist. And during that session, Jordan describes the sexual contact, the kissing, the touching. And it's only then when it's forwarded to law enforcement that the police get involved. And so the police open up a criminal investigation and search warrants are issued. And Neverland is searched. And they're looking for videotapes, photographs, everything is taken. But almost,
why specifically videotapes?
I guess it's quite common for a paedophile to recreate situations.
And I was just wondering whether or not this was something, and a very explicit allegation that maybe Jordan had revealed during a confession or under this lucid state, or that the father was saying? Because it sounds like they were looking specifically for videotapes.
I think it might not necessarily have been of Michael Jackson himself, but I guess he might have an archive or have footage, of others.
Sure.
That's why I understood that to be.
I'm with you.
Any evidence that they could say that he was a paedophile. But almost immediately, investigators can't really find anything. There's no physical evidence, no clear proof. And behind the scenes, they're scrambling, trying to find anyone else, any pattern or corroboration. So other boys are interviewed, and some names you might recognize. A boy called Wade Robson, another boy called Brett Barnes, both publicly say they stayed with Jackson, slept in his bed, but nothing happened. However, we will come back to Wade Robson in particular. He features several times in this story.
Yeah, interesting. But then I also could see how, if there are quite a lot of boys, it's easy for someone like Michael to kind of say, well, just tell the cops this. It's a possibility.
Quite possible, absolutely, yeah. So there's a complete media storm about this. Michael responds publicly, denies everything, says he's innocent, calls the allegations disgusting. But behind the scenes...
Of course he would say that. That's like the pedophile's motto.
Well, yeah. But behind the scenes, the pressure is building. There isn't just a criminal case. There's now also a civil case against him. Now, that's filed in 1993.
By who? Is this by the Chandlers?
Yeah. So both investigations continue and the media pressure intensifies. So Michael cancels part of his tour and starts treatment for painkiller dependency. And when he returns, Michael Jackson is ordered to undergo a strip search. He's photographed and examined to verify if it matches the description from Jordan Chandler.
Oh, so it's like he can describe like a mole or something on his body or something, or his penis.
Yeah, exactly that. They were looking at sketches, looking at skin tone, which was consistent with vitiligo. But the problem is that vitiligo patches can change over time. So where Jordan might say, oh, the skin was like this, by the time they might be looking at Michael, that could have changed slightly. So you couldn't rely upon that.
Yeah, and he is actively applying bleaching stuff to physically change it. So I guess over time,
that could have changed it
that
as well.
Could have changed it as well.
Jordan also says that Michael is circumcised, and the exam shows he isn't. So this is very
interesting.
Awful.
It is awful that he had to describe that.
But then he's a young boy. He could be mistaken, or was he influenced, or perhaps not fully aware?
And I don't know if a young boy would know what circumcision is.
Basically, in the end, the examination doesn't really settle anything. In fact, it probably just makes the whole situation worse for Jordan. Now, this is obviously taking its toll on Michael. That's not necessary to sympathize with him, but it's clearly affecting him. But let's say he is innocent and this is extortion, then this is completely unfair. But to make matters worse, one of the Jackson's own family turns on him, LaToya Jackson.
Yeah, you mentioned this in the last episode.
Yeah, so in a statement, she says that she loves her brother, but she won't stay silent about crimes against children.
Tell me.
And she claims she has proof and even offers to sell it. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Let me just throw something out there. I bet you any money, nothing comes from this. Someone persuades her to not reveal it or whatever.
Well, first thing, if she does have proof, then why are you now talking about it?
And why do you want to sell it?
That's the main thing. So you're not trying to do the greater good here. You're trying to profit from this?
Yes.
So some outlets do show interest, but the deals collapse because the evidence never appears. And then suspicion grows that she's just lying. And then everything just changes because shortly after, she just takes it all back and says, oh, Michael is 1,000% innocent. So she starts defending him publicly again and says there was nothing unusual about his relationship with children. So why would she go and say that?
Hey, throwing it out there. She's obviously, and that was a very key thing that you said, I'm willing to sell it. And then all of a sudden it doesn't go anywhere. Could it be that the Michael Jackson estate has then given her above what she would have probably wanted had she sold it to make this go away?
Possibly, but she's turned on her family.
She has... Yes, which is a good thing she's turned on her family.
If it's
but
true,
then she's been bought by her family, which, doesn't sound great, does it?
Yeah, either way, it doesn't look good.
Again, it leaves us in a situation of not knowing what the truth is, right?
But then she does explain the reason she said what she said was because she was forced, that her ex-husband, Jack Gordon, was violently abusive, that he controlled her, and coerced her into making those statements. Now, apparently he also forced her to give interviews, do a Playboy shoot, and it was why back in the early 90s that she revealed that her dad had abused her as a child in one of her memoirs.
But we know the abuse from her husband is probably true.
That is true, because I think she feared for her life and she ends up escaping her marriage. Her brothers actually come to take her away.
Oh, really? Good for them.
So it maybe explains why she said what she said at the time, or her ex-husband is trying to get money. Maybe that's what he's using LaToya for. But the damage is already done, because now, even within Michael's own family, the narrative is kind of fractured.
Yeah, it is. It makes it so difficult.
So Michael's defense team tried to delay the civil case until after the criminal case has been determined, but the judge denies that request and rules that the civil case has to go first, which is terrible news for Michael's defense, because anything revealed in that civil case could then later be used in the criminal trial.
Oh, sneaky, sneaky.
Yeah, and that meant his entire reputation could be dragged through the mud for years, costing millions before a criminal case even begins. And then something controversial happens, because Jackson's insurers play a major role in negotiating and paying a settlement out to the Chandlers.
Wow, he has insurance for this?
Well, I guess
the public liability, right?
Yeah. And reportedly, that was over Jackson and his lawyers' objections. So they settled the civil case out of court to avoid financial loss and prolonged damage to Michael's public
Sure,
image.
you just want it to go away, right? Regardless of whether or not you're innocent or guilty, let's say he is innocent, of course you would still want this to go away. Again, it's so tricky, because you can see it, you would say, oh, if someone's paid, settled out of court, they're clearly guilty. You normally get that kind of narrative or that stance, but actually he is a business. He is a brand. And of course you have to think about that estate.
But the assumption is guilt. That's what everyone thinks, because he paid in order to make a problem go away. And so even though the civil and criminal cases are completely different, civil is about money and damages and I guess a lower burden of proof, whereas a criminal case is about guilt beyond reasonable doubt.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now, behind the scenes, Michael is reportedly furious because he didn't fully control that decision, or at least that's what the public is led to believe. I guess we won't know for sure. The insurance company minimized the risk to Michael and the business. And regardless of innocence, those that defend Jackson will say it helps his legal team because they can focus on winning the criminal case now. Because if they both ran together, yeah, it would have cost so much more money and could have gone on forever, basically.
So what I'm hearing from you is that this was a move more about damage control or damage reduction. The damage is already done, but it's how severe is the damage going to be?
Yeah.
And that's what this move sounds like.
Yeah. So there are a couple of updates to this specific set of events that happened afterwards. One wouldn't be for another 10 years. In 2004, the legal secretary to Evan Chandler's attorney at the time of the trial publishes a book called Redemption, The Truth Behind the Michael Jackson Child Molestation Allegation.
Go on.
And in it, she claims she witnessed everything, says the entire case was planned step by step, an elaborate extortion scheme, which I do buy into. And here's why. Because 6 months after the settlement, the Chandlers stop cooperating with the criminal investigation, and everything hinges on Jordan Chandler, right? Because without him, there isn't much of a case. And ultimately, he refuses to testify. Now, if you wanted justice, sure, maybe you would seek compensation, but you would also want that man behind bars if he had hurt your child. Unless, of course, part of the deal, or that 20 million deal, is that they were not to testify. Albeit it was later revealed that this settlement did not prevent the Chandlers from testifying in the criminal case. So for me, if the allegations were true and Jordan was telling the truth, what does that say about choosing money over justice?
Yes, I completely agree. And it is complicated. I just don't know. I think that both things can be true. And the reason why I say this is because abuse isn't always this horrific physical thing where you are left bruised and attacked and wounded. It could be a situation where you are in the scope of someone who's very powerful. They treat you very nicely. They do take advantage of you. They can coerce you. You come out the other end, not being like broken or whatever.
It wasn't violent or
wasn't violent, but it's still an abuse of trust and abuse of power.
Yes.
It's so tricky because there is clearly a sexual element there.
Yes. And I think that's the thing. If these kids are they're wrapped up in like this make-believe world, or they're at Neverland, they're going on all these trips, and genuinely Michael is treating them well 99% of the time.
Yes.
They
Yeah,
perhaps can't distinguish or rationalize at that age what is happening.
yeah. We might come under a lot of attack for that, but that comes from personal experience where I've been in a situation where like I was under the wing of a couple guys and they were way older than me in their 40s. And like they gave me a sense of freedom. They gave me a sense of I got a lot from them. But years later, when I look back, I'm like, that was a clear abuse of trust and power in that dynamic. It's only years later when you understand the dynamics between people who are older than you and younger minors that you go, yeah, that's clearly a problem. But at the time, maybe Jordan wasn't hurt.
Yeah, I guess it's done in a way that on reflection, like you said, coming away, you then start to question, go, actually, that wasn't right. I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the rest of the time, everything else was fun.
Yeah, it's so tricky. And I can imagine not understand, however, how Jordan's dad could sit there and go, okay, clearly Jordan wasn't visually hurt, but also a crime has happened. So the immediate response isn't, oh, I need to protect my child.
Yeah, and that's the bit I have a problem with. And so police had interviewed a number of children during this investigation of the criminal case, many of whom had spent significant time with Michael. Some, like I say, had shared rooms or beds, but police found no evidence that was sufficient enough that could be used in court. So no witnesses, no testimony, no corroborating evidence. And without that, the case collapses. And then, like I say, the Chandlers, they did stop cooperating during that investigation.
Do we know why specifically?
We don't know why, but bizarrely, just a couple of years later, in 1995, Jordan Chandler emancipates himself from both parents at the age of 15.
Wow.
Now, why the hell would a 15-year-old do that? Because he's no longer legally under their control.
And did he get a settlement out of interest?
Yeah, they got 20 million
Sure.
as a family.
Now, the only thing I can think of is like he is 15 at that point. It could be that, yeah, they got the settlement and maybe the parents are now squandering that money that should technically be Jordan's, right? And maybe he recognized that the only way, and remember, when you have that kind of money, people flock around you. So you've got probably people who probably want to stake at that money and like, well, do you know what? I can help you get all that money. I can help you emancipate yourself from your parents.
Possibly, yeah. But then for a judge to grant that, they have to prove some pretty significant circumstances.
Oh, interesting. What did they find?
We don't know. I don't think that's actually revealed.
I see.
But for me, that's something serious that convinces a judge to say that he's happy that you shouldn't remain under your parents' authority.
Wow. Okay.
So was it because he realized that he had been manipulated and used in this? Or was he angry that his parents chose millions rather than protecting his well-being?
Yeah.
Or was it something else altogether? Or is it a combination of all of these things? We don't really know. But in 2005, June Chandler does say in court that she hadn't spoken to her son in over a decade. So the relationship completely breaks down, which suggests this kind of deep resentment, I guess. And then in 2005, still supposedly living together, Jordan files a restraining order against his own father, alleging that he attacked him with a weight. And then, interestingly, in 2009, just months after Michael Jackson's death, Evan Chandler is found dead by suicide. And so whether that is just some weird coincidence, but people find the timings just suspicious enough to think that there's something else related to that.
In what way? Like in terms of that he might have been killed?
I guess that's one way. I thought guilt, maybe. He doesn't seem like the guy that would feel guilty.
Feel guilty, yeah. I think people misunderstand how guilt can grab a person. Very rarely does it do that. You know,
You're speaking from experience.
The claws are not big enough to latch itself on when it comes to guilt.
So I think when you look at the full picture, you're not just looking at an allegation made by this family. You're looking at a family that clearly had some serious issues.
Yeah, do you know what? It's so tricky because I think it is such a complicated situation where money is now involved, especially this 20 million payout. And so that can complicate things way more and twist kind of how people might interpret the things that followed afterwards.
That's
the
true.
Emancipation, the suicide, the restraining order. There's $20 million at stake here. And it's about who controls that money.
Yeah. And I think for me, it undermines any credibility, or maybe not any. It undermines some credibility of what was said.
It does. It certainly makes it difficult. And I know I keep pushing back on it because I do believe that Jordan was molested. And I think we touched upon this in the previous episode. And it's because it's after this case that happened. A friend of mine, Terry George, he for years was always vocal about when he was 13 years old, he had won a competition to interview Michael Jackson. When he met up with Michael Jackson, they exchanged numbers. And Michael Jackson, following that interview, would call him up at his house. He'd be like, is Terry there? They would have a chat and stuff. And during those conversations, Michael Jackson would ask him really personal questions about, did he masturbate? What did he think about when he did it? And that was never a secret amongst Terry George and all of his friends. And remember, this happened way before Jordan Chandler. But then when this case hit the headlines, that's when someone in his circle then went to the papers. Really? And so every time an allegation came out about Michael Jackson here in the UK, the first person that the British tabloids would go to would be Terry George knocking on his door to find out, like, what are your comments on this, for example?
Interesting.
And so that is on the record as happening years before all this happened, like I think in the 70s.
So whilst there wasn't obviously physical abuse there was a very inappropriate conversation with a minor.
100%. And I think based on that timeline and based that this was out there long before all of this happened, says to me that there is a capacity for Michael Jackson to be inappropriate with a child.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I believe this is true. And we know that for a fact because he is letting young kids sleep in his bed, regardless of whether or not anything bad happened or whatever he's gone through. That is still inappropriate behavior.
Absolutely. And it's crazy that he doesn't seem to learn from that, because we'll come on to this, but it didn't seem to stop him from behaving like that after this case.
Sure. And it gets more complicated when you throw in the fact that he is Michael Jackson. He is the biggest superstar on the planet. You then all of a sudden have parents who are happy for their children to go into Michael Jackson's personal space because there's a potential benefit for them, whether or not it's like an association with Michael Jackson or they're physically getting something in return. Mm-hmm. And that is a free trip to Neverland, a free trip to Vegas. That's exactly what happened to June. That's exactly how they benefited.
Yeah.
And the next thing, the way that scales up, and it makes sense, is you've got this very eager guy, dad, who would like to make a big quick buck from it. And so he uses that to extort Michael Jackson. And again, that's not the same as the abuse not happening.
Yeah.
It could still happen and he could still take the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely right there. And Jordan himself, he actually disappears from the public view. I guess he wants to go back to a normal life.
He wants to enjoy his 20 mil.
Yeah, I guess he would be. But one thing we haven't really spoken about is Michael Jackson's romantic relationships. Now, they are very few and far between. At one time, he supposedly had a relationship with Brooke Shields, but she said she felt it was more asexual, or he was more asexual, because he's always quite distant in that respect.
Sure.
Interestingly, the romantic relationships that we do know of mostly happened after the court cases.
Yeah, like a PR move, do you think?
I do wonder if it is damage control, because in my opinion, it tries to prove that he's not a paedophile. Look, he's married to a woman. Yeah,
and am I right in saying the most famous one, and I'm sure you're just about to come onto it, is Priscilla Presley?
Lisa Marie Presley.
That's what I said. It's exactly what I said.
Yes. I was just going to say that there are rumors that he was involved with various different men, but that is speculation and never corroborated. But there was this speculation about his sexuality. So were these marriages to curb that, or the allegations? Possibly both.
This is the first time I ever heard of the term beard because of Michael Jackson and the Lisa Marie Presley. But do we know who the suspected male relationships that he had with anyone that we might know?
I don't think that they were necessarily famous, but they were, I think one was like connected to a doctor or some kind of physician or whatever. They're just these people. I didn't recognize the names, so no.
So no. Nobody we care about.
So Lisa Marie Presley, which is obviously Elvis's daughter, she marries Michael Jackson in 1994, just 20 days after she gets divorced herself.
Oh.
At the time, it had only just been a few months since the civil lawsuit was settled.
Yeah.
And the criminal lawsuit was still ongoing at the time. But it's short-lived because they separate in December and then they finalize the divorce next year.
Oh, does she ever speak about what the marriage was like?
She says that Michael was always a troubled man, but a loving man. She says that he was consumed by prescription drugs and was surrounded by people that she just couldn't break through to him. She even says that in one of their final conversations, because they still kept in touch, he told her that someone was going to kill him for his music catalogue.
It's Paul! If I die, just know it's Paul McCartney there with Linda and their sausages going,
Yeah.
We've got to get him.
We got to get Michael. And then there's the second marriage, which was completely different. It was to a woman called Debbie Rowe. Now, she was a nurse in the office of one of Michael's dermatologists.
Oh.
They marry in 1996, and their first child is Prince. Then they have Paris in 1998.
Hold the phone. They were married?
Yeah.
I honestly thought it was just sperm donor surrogacy thing.
So I think the first two children were with Debbie. But then the third child,
Blanky
or BG.
BG.
Well, that's how he's now known. That's his name.
BG.
BIGI.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
He was through a donor, as far as I'm aware.
Sure. So he actually married this chick because I remember seeing pictures of her and she's just such a soccer mom. She's just so plain, not glamorous at all. You would just think, oh, he's hired her to have the babies.
And that's what most people think, is this marriage transactional?
But clearly it's important for him to
Yeah.
have been married in order to have these children.
Well, he is a Jehovah's Witness.
But yeah, do you think that is the thing?
An element of it. Also shows this kind of love story, I guess. It helps with PR. But he also just wanted to be a father, which is what Debbie says later.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
When I found out I was going to be a parent, I immediately felt a lot of anxiety and worry. So I went on to BetterHelp to try to look for a therapist to help me with that.
My relationship with my family and with my boyfriend and with myself were suffering. I really needed help.
I was ruminating a lot. Really getting those thoughts out to a therapist and getting feedback was just life-changing.
Discover what BetterHelp Online Therapy can do for you. Visit BetterHelp.com today.
They divorce in 2000, and there is a settlement of $8 million.
Wow, as late as 2000 that they divorced.
Custody was initially given to Michael. Then comes the third child, Prince Michael II, Blanca, or now known as BG. So he's born via surrogacy. And then there's that odd moment back in 2002 in Berlin where Michael steps out onto a balcony of a hotel holding his infant son, and for a brief second he dangles him over the edge.
Scary.
And literally, like, the crowd screams. It's all over the news, isn't it, within hours. And he later says it was a terrible mistake. But more than that, it shows a bit of a glimpse into a person who wasn't fully grounded. And by the early 2000s, Michael Jackson was a father of three, twice divorced, owned the most valuable music catalogue in the world, and a man whose body and mind was quietly deteriorating. He had vitiligo, lupus, he was having multiple surgeries, and he had chronic insomnia. And so things were not about to get better for Michael. He makes the mistake of doing a documentary with Martin Bashir.
Yes. I love that documentary.
And we know how that turned out for Princess Diana. Bashir had mocked up a bank statement to deceive the princess, playing into her paranoia and fear, coercing her into doing that interview. Now, I'm not suggesting he did that to Michael, but we have to question Bashir's ethics when doing this documentary.
Certainly. However, Princess Diana, she came out on top with that, regardless of whether or not his underhandedness was involved or what degree. He shouldn't have done it, but that was a brilliant piece of PR.
The documentary was called Living with Michael Jackson. Now, Martin Bashir had 8 months of access inside Netherland, inside his life. And within it, there's a moment where Jackson is sitting beside a 13-year-old boy called Gavin Arvizo. He's a cancer patient that had met Michael a few years earlier. And they're holding hands, and Jackson is questioned about whether sharing his bed with children is acceptable.
Ooh, this is a kid that is sick. This is, I don't know, it feels like this is not the right time to be asking those types of questions because it's not the same. Clearly Michael has a very compassionate side, and this kid is clearly very sick. And then he's asking about sexual abuse allegations.
Well, he doesn't ask him that in front of him. I think he's just saying, is it right to share a bed with a child?
Oh, what does he say?
Michael says, why can't you share a bed? It's one of the most loving things to do, which doesn't come across in the best way. But for me, it just shows someone, well, I don't know, actually. Could it show someone who's just so innocent and naive that just doesn't really understand or compute how someone would interpret that differently?
Yes.
I feel like that is Michael's mindset.
Yes.
But to anyone else, it's what the hell are you doing?
Exactly. It's because the rest of society has been shaped by what had happened during the Satanic Panic and the aftermath of that, where we become so averse to any concept of a man having close proximity to a child who he isn't related to.
Yeah.
So we're shaped by that, whereas Michael is shaped by his history. And remember, Michael doesn't grow up in our world. He grows up very isolated, concentrated in this kind of this world of whatever happens to him that shapes him into what he is. So he's not touched by the same cloth that we are.
No.
So I get from a sense that he would sit there and genuinely, candidly, earnestly believe that one of the most loving things you can do is share your bed with another human being.
Yeah, I can see how he would believe it. But for the 15 million viewers in the UK and 20 million in the US, it poses some serious questions.
Sure. And also you've got to remember what's the purpose of this documentary. There's probably a PR element to it as well. He thinks that this is going to show him in a different light. So it's very calculated. But the fact that he misses the beat on so many of these things, questions, shows that is how he thinks.
Yeah, because for him, he's got nothing to hide, or that's how it seems. He's trying to paint this picture that it's quite wholesome. But the guy who's just had, a few years earlier, gone through all these allegations, and you haven't changed your behavior, you haven't learned that actually, do you know what, maybe that isn't right, or I'm not going to be as open about it. But I guess for Michael, he's like, well, if I be completely open about it, it's the best thing to do.
Do you think that's a potential strategy, is to mask everything by coming across as this clearly differently wired human being inside his brain? Do you know what I mean? Do you think that's the strategy?
I don't think it is with him. I don't know if he would be that manipulative in terms of trying to paint a different picture of him. I think he's just wired differently.
But then there's also, remember, there's clearly a difference between Michael Jackson and the Michael Jackson company. And it could be there's the shots being called or instructed by the people who are controlling it. That's just me being speculative.
Yeah, potentially. But I think what we're kind of seeing is he's a bit like Peter Pan himself in terms of like, he doesn't seem like he's ever really grown up properly.
No.
And like you say, his whole background is completely different to us. One time he even hires out a supermarket, which is populated with people he knew so he could see what it was like to shop for food. So it just shows his version of normal is completely different to us.
Yeah. It is strange. That's how famous he is. Because remember, he's been famous since he was a kid, right?
Yeah.
And Michael Jackson's always been in that situation. But wild, hired out a supermarket.
Yeah. And so this documentary by Bashir caused this huge public outrage, a lot of media scrutiny, and then authorities didn't have any choice but to start looking quite closely at Jackson again, particularly with his relations with Gavin Arvizo, the cancer patient, because he and his family then come forward with allegations after the documentary airs saying that he was also molested.
And I'm assuming we're going to go through motivations for wanting to sue Michael Jackson. And I'm assuming it might be, well, we want to save our son and we need money for the treatment. I bet that would be an element.
Well, let's see, because at first Gavin says nothing inappropriate happened, but then he changes his account. Now, Michael has been supporting the family financially. He invites them to Netherland multiple times. They stay for months, but behind the scenes, things seem to deteriorate a bit because, according to staff, the family becomes difficult, unruly, damaging property, bringing other members to stay, and eventually they're asked to leave.
And is Michael there at the restaurants at the time, or was he like away and he's just giving them free reign?
I get the sense that he's not always there.
Yeah, that sounds like it to me. So you're messing up my spaceman.
And so that's when the tone changes from praise of Michael to allegations. And soon after, Neverland is raided. And so they're looking again for computers, photographs, books, all seized, but no physical evidence is found, no illicit material. And so, despite that, Michael is still arrested and he's charged with multiple felonies. And this time there's no settlement. He refuses because now it's about something else, vindication, clearing his name once and for all. So the case goes to trial, and it's the trial of the people versus Jackson.
Wow.
And outside the courtroom, it's chaos because there's hundreds of fans, there's cameras everywhere, it's live TV giving updates. Even Michael Jackson impersonators are turning up.
Really? And what is the sentiment at this period of time largely? Where are people weighted towards?
I think it's still pretty divided. I don't know if it's 50-50, but there's enough supporters on either side.
Interesting.
So it's a bit of a star-studded event because Macaulay Culkin turns up, who takes a stand and says nothing inappropriate ever happened with him. But then the prosecution presents their case that Gavin Arvizo was shown adult material, was given alcohol, Michael used to call it Jesus juice, and described graphic behavior with Michael masturbating in front of him.
Okay.
In total, around 140 witnesses take the stand, including Wade Robson. Now, you may remember that we mentioned that name before. He was a kid at the time. He had been spending time with Michael Jackson. He basically comes out and corroborates what Macaulay Culkin had said, like nothing had happened as a kid, right? And he says this under oath. Remember that, under oath.
Fine. That's important, guys.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
The majority of the witnesses, they all support Michael. Some staff members say his behavior felt unusual, but actually there's nothing to these allegations. And so with the defense, they're looking into the credibility of the Arvizos, particularly Gavin's mother, Janet. Now, years earlier, in 1998, there's another case that the family is caught shoplifting at JCPenney's. Security detains them, but then the story changes that Janet claims that she was violently assaulted, even sexually assaulted by the security guards.
Okay, so A, this family gets in a lot of trouble for a start. They are shoplifting. They probably are quite poor. But what you're saying here is that she was caught shoplifting and she's thrown an accusation that the security guard had molested her, which is showing a pattern of behavior that she's likely to potentially repeat in the future.
Yep, that's right. That's one thing. She also is accused of giving her children acting lessons, preparing for this case.
Oh, for this case specifically?
Oh, no, sorry, for the JCP Penney case, essentially, to back up what was happening.
Sure.
JCPenney settles $152,000, but later the truth unravels that it's actually the husband that had hit her, and Janet does admit under oath that it was him, not the guards. Wow. So I guess it changes this picture because the family's credibility, once again, is drawn under scrutiny. Can we trust these people? Which, of course, Michael's defense team are going to try and unpick every single thing.
That's their job.
But I do feel like they are exploiting, to a degree, this case. But again, like you say, doesn't mean to say that the abuse didn't happen.
True, yes. It is so tricky. And I now appreciate properly, it is a situation that you can be very divided on.
And also the timeline of the abuse doesn't quite add up. Gavin gave conflicting versions of the events. The jury is asked to believe that nothing had happened between Gavin and Michael for 3 years. And then a month after the documentary airs, in that exact moment when the world is watching Michael and these investigations are underway, that is when the abuse happened. So the timeline becomes a major problem for the prosecution, and some jurors later say that they found it hard to believe the Arvizos.
Sure.
So in the end, the jury makes their final decision. Michael Jackson is found not guilty of all accounts, every single one.
Wow, completely exonerated here.
Yep, no ambiguity whatsoever. But it doesn't feel like a victory because the trial has gone on for nearly 2 years, costing tens of millions, and it's left Michael physically and psychologically destroyed. He enters the courtroom at points weighing less than 120 pounds. He's unable to eat, sleep, and he's only able to use propofol. I don't know if I'm saying that drug right.
Propofol.
to help him sleep, essentially.
I see. Okay. So, yeah, he is, but 120 pounds. That is a small man.
Yes, absolutely. After the verdict, Michael Jackson leaves the courthouse. He leaves Santa Maria. Effectively, he leaves the United States. He then lives abroad for a couple of years, including Ireland. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Where else did he live?
Bahrain and some other rented homes. I don't know what
Okay, so like the Middle East, but Ireland as well.
Yeah, but he never really returns to Neverland, apparently. So something he built as a sanctuary has now been destroyed.
Well, I mean, if you take the stance that he is innocent and you've got all these people using him as an opportunity, sure, that's going to be tainted, right? Guaranteed. Because what you've done, essentially, is you've taken something that is, in his mind, supposed to be very innocent and wholesome, and you've tainted it with this air of sexual abuse that's, again, assuming he's innocent, is very disgusting and repugnant to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I imagine, again, if he's innocent, would be also disgusting and repugnant to someone like him as well.
Yes, absolutely. Or maybe he's now finally learned his lesson and going, do you know what? Perhaps I shouldn't invite kids back there anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing is he's not making any money at this point in time. His debt has reached almost 500 million, which is absurd.
Whoa! From what? Do we know?
Decades of spending, Neverland, the upkeep, the staff, the zoo, the constant travel, all the legal costs that he's had with these allegations over the years, and just his general lifestyle. And he's also borrowed money against a share of his Sony catalog.
I see.
And at high interest rates as well. So on paper, he's one of the most wealthiest people alive. But in reality...
He's also hemorrhaging the money, right?
Yeah.
Because it all costs money to run these things. One of the standout moments from the Martin Bashir documentary, from what I can remember, is there is this scene where Martin Bashir is following Michael Jackson through a mall, and it's really opulent. It's got green marble kind of pillars and walls, and it's just gorgeous. And he's walking through this like very expensive shop.
I think I know the scene that you're talking about.
Yeah, and he is just... The mall is shut, I think.
So he probably, again, pays for it to be shut?
I can't remember, but either way, he's going through and he's saying, yeah, we'll take 2 of those. Oh, that's quite nice. I'll have that, please. And Adam, I'm talking, how much is that giant vase? Oh, it's $100,000 or something. Okay, yeah, I'll have those. And actually, I saw a couple that are like in white or something in the front. Throw those 2 in as well. And he's, oh, I quite like that horse. And he's just walking through and he's just picking out things. And these things are like hundreds of thousands of dollars in one go. And I can't remember exactly what Martin Bashir says, but he comments on like, how do you feel about just spending that much money on a whim? And he's just like, well, it's just how it is.
That's crazy.
But yeah, he has just got so much money that it doesn't even matter how much it is.
But it's around this point in time, when obviously he's got a lot of debt, that the deal arrives for the This Is It tour.
Yeah, I remember this very vividly. I remember the hair. He had a lot of hair. He had a brilliant mane of hair, dark sunglasses.
So around this time, the tour is announced, and he's introduced to a couple of men, Thomas Barrick and Philip Schutz. They're the owners of AG Live, the second largest concert promoter in the world.
They own O2, don't they?
I don't know, maybe. I'll take your word for it.
Okay, please don't. Unverified.
So a deal begins to take shape, and in March 2009, Jackson appears at the O2 Arena in London. Between 3,000 and 7,000 fans are waiting, around 350 journalists. He arrives, but he's 90 minutes late. But he steps onto the stage.
There was 50,000, but they all left.
Yeah, they needed
leaving 3.
They needed their dinner. When he finally steps onto the stage, he looks quite thin, quite fragile, but he tells the crowd, this is it. This is really it. The final curtain call.
I swear to God, this is it, guys. Like 5 months.
He was right.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's dark. But like Elton John did the same thing. He's like, I'm not going to tour anymore. And then 5 years later, he'll come back. This is the final one. This is final.
The final. It's like Cher as well. You know, whenever anyone that's in their 70s and like, I said it would. That was the last one, but I really need to pay for these new boobs.
Yeah. So this is the It tour.
Yes.
This is it.
And it was going to be a huge concert, which was planned for July. And initially, Jackson agreed to 10 concerts, but within days, it's expanded to 50. Now, there is speculation that Michael didn't want to do as many as 50 shows. He was forced into doing that. But again, speculation. Now, roughly...
So it's like, how am I going to get out of this? I know.
Now, that's dark. Now, roughly 750,000 tickets are sold and around $85 million is generated before a single performance.
And how much does he get from that?
Well, he gets around or an advance of about $30 million, which is going to tie him over.
Is it though? Because you said like he was in debt of up to 500 million.
Yeah, I guess he just needs to do this for a few months. Then he'll get the rest of the money and whatever royalties, you know. Sure. And they're sorting him out like a mansion in Holmby Hills. He's got all his loans and living expenses covered. He's fine.
Holmby Hills, that's back in Los Angeles, right?
Yes. Obviously, the show's in London. And I'm sure he'd get to put up in London.
Yeah.
So the stakes are pretty enormous. And for AEG, a successful run could generate hundreds of millions. A global tour is projected at like 450 million or more. So, yeah, they're going to earn a lot of money from this.
Out of interest, and you probably don't know, but just your opinion, do you think there is a degree of exploitation happening here against Michael? Because they can potentially see that clearly he's in a lot of debt. And he's clearly, a responsible person would go, he's not equipped for this, but we can exploit him. Do you think that there is a degree of that?
We will come on to that.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you have planned ahead.
Yep. So behind the scenes, things are already going wrong, though, because before the announcement, AEG CEO Randy Phillips sends an email describing Jackson as locked in his room, he's drunk, he's despondent, and Phillips later testifies that he had to physically get him out of his room, that he screamed at him, even slapped him just to get him moving. So,
he slapped Michael Jackson?
Yes, yeah.
Wow, you don't do that.
And that was just to get Michael on stage to announce his comeback tour.
What?
Yeah.
Just to announce it.
Yeah.
It's like, bitch, we are doing this. We've committed. You've got your $30 million. It's like, yeah, but I spent that on prescription drugs.
Which is why he was probably like 90 minutes late.
Yeah.
So rehearsals begin in spring 2009. On good days, he is still Michael Jackson. The dancers see it, the musicians feel it. Moments where everything clicks into place. It's his movement, his voice, his presence. He's the greatest performer of his generation.
There's a glimmer of him still in there.
Yeah. But on bad days, he is definitely not that. He is incoherent. He's cold when the room is warm. He's trembling. He's forgetting his choreography that he has done 1,000 times.
Wow.
And he's losing weight and he's not sleeping.
Losing even more weight. He was 120 pounds before.
Yeah, that was at the trial. So he might have put on a bit of weight since then. So on June 19th, 2009, 6 days before his death, show director Kenny Ortega sends an email and the subject line is trouble at the front.
Okay.
He describes finding Jackson lost, incoherent, cold to the touch, trembling and unable to perform. And he wraps Michael in these blankets and tries to feed him some food. And he writes there are strong signs of paranoia, anxiety and obsessive-like behavior. I think the very best thing we can do is to get a top psychiatrist to evaluate him ASAP. Others are even more direct. An associate producer says plainly, Michael is dying. He needs to be put in a hospital.
Wow.
But the response is shut down. Philip replies, it is critical that neither you, me, or anyone becomes amateur psychiatrists or physicians. Instead, attention turns to Jackson's personal doctor, a guy called Conrad Murray.
Okay, why?
Well, he's described as an extremely successful, totally unbiased, and totally ethical. And so he's the best person to call the shots on Michael's well-being, not anyone else, basically.
Yeah.
And so Phillips instructs everyone to listen to Conrad and his medical judgment. So now everything runs through that man. But Conrad Murray, now, he's had his internal medicine certification lapse. He's had no training in anesthesiology.
Mm-hmm. Anesthesiology?
That's what I meant, yes.
So Michael Jackson, in order to sleep at night, he's been anesthetized.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whoa.
He doesn't really have experience, as far as I could understand, in anesthetic administration. And he's filed for bankruptcy, defaulted on a $1 million mortgage, and his child support is in arrears. So this is a man not really equipped to be a doctor at this moment in time, and he has a big incentive to hold down this job to make sure that Michael goes through with this performance.
Eesh.
So Jackson personally requests him to be his physician for the London shows. He does trust him. And AEG agrees to pay Conrad Murray $150,000 per month, a salary which was negotiated down from an initial demand of $5 million per year.
Wow. That's so mad.
Mm-hmm.
So there's incentives all over the place here.
Oh, yeah. And the contract contains a clause, if the shows are postponed or cancelled, Murray can be terminated and his income depends on Jackson performing.
Oh, I'll say it again. There are incentives all over the place here.
So if they'd done like a basic background check on his current qualifications, they probably would realize, maybe he's not the right guy. So Murray begins administering propofol.
Wow, we are slaughtering him. Yeah.
I can't.
Anaesthetist stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, this drug, he's doing it nightly and it's not in a hospital and it's in a bedroom. Now, propofol, I really should have learned how to pronounce that, should be administered exclusively by qualified healthcare professionals, i.e. anaesthetists, and via an IV injection or infusion into a vein.
So how's he doing it?
Well, I think he is doing
Is he
that.
flicking pills in his mouth?
He's probably watched a YouTube video or something.
Okay. Right.
Continuous supervision of vital signs such as blood pressure, oxygen levels is mandatory. So you have to watch someone as soon as you give them this drug.
Sure, you put them on a monitor, right?
Uh-huh. Except the monitoring equipment isn't really apparently opened. And so he's half-arsing this completely. And he has no means of measuring Michael Jackson's oxygen levels.
Oh, so he's like, Michael's like, I need to sleep. And he's like, but I haven't got everything packed out yet. It's fine. We'll get it packed out in the morning. Just give me the drugs or something like that.
Yeah, because he's doing this every night in a rented mansion. So the most famous person in the world can just try and get some sleep.
It's crazy. And you can't say no to that stuff. For example, as you said in the first episode, if you do say no, I know this situation is different, but if you do say no, you'll sack you, get someone else that will do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this guy sounds like a lot is riding on it. He's behind and like child support. So he's obviously going to be like, I'll do whatever you want.
That's how it seems to me, definitely.
I remember like seeing some of the photographs of the bedroom when he was found after he died, and there being quite a lot of equipment around, like in his bedroom. Do you know what I mean? It felt like it was very clearly a bedroom.
Yeah. So on June 24th, 2009, Michael Jackson arrives for his final rehearsal. It's around 6:30 p.m. and he works until just after midnight. Footage is later released in This Is It, the post-hummus documentary.
Post-hummus.
Posthumous?
Posthumous. Oh, the posthumous. I thought you were saying someone's name, the name of the director.
No. God.
Okay, the posthumous. Posthumous.
Yes.
What is wrong with us?
What I'm trying to say is when you see this footage, and I think it's good that they showed it in the documentary, it shows Michael at his best. He is sharp, he's focused, he's engaged. He's performing the Earth song with full commitment, hitting all the cues, directing the band, and it's one of the good nights. Those that see him, they all say the same thing. He looks like Michael Jackson again.
Oh, what date is this?
His last rehearsal.
That's the thing, though. I knew something as soon as you said this is one of the good days, because that's always happens, right? People get sick, and they get a little bit better, then they die.
So he finishes his rehearsals, he goes home, his chef prepares dinner, he eats, he goes upstairs to his bedroom. Murray is with him, and what happens next is known primarily through Murray's account, because according to Murray, Jackson cannot sleep and he is agitated. So Murray begins administering sedatives one after another, escalating through the night.
One after the other?
Mm-hmm. Around 1:30, he has some diazepam. Then half an hour later, he has some lorazepam. Then an hour later, he has some
marzipan.
Midazolam. I'm not making these up. Around 5 o'clock, he has some more lorazepam. And at 7:30 a.m., he has some more midazolam again. So literally, he has had 5 doses of things in the space of 6 hours.
Wow, and they're all pans.
Yeah, they are. Hours pass, nothing works, and Michael still can't sleep. His body can no longer shut down naturally.
There must be something physically wrong with him. Like, you hear these people where they lose the ability to physically sleep and then they die, right? The fact that he's taken all of these pams, marzipans and everything, that is so bad. He's got so much in him, and yet he still cannot sleep.
His body has clearly become accustomed to having probably that much, right? This is something he's probably done for a long time to try and relax, switch off, and maybe with all the drugs he's had and the paranoia, he can't.
When it comes to, we're going to butcher it again, anestheticism or all the marzipans, that stuff puts you out. Like, I don't think that you adapt to that shit.
But I think he's been on this for a while.
It is wild to me. It's so sad.
So according to Murray, Jackson begins asking for propofol.
Fuck. It's difficult to be serious.
To help him sleep and rest repeatedly. And Murray claims that he does resist. And he also says that he's trying to wean him off it. But approximately 10:40 a.m. in the morning, he just gives in. He's like, okay, you need to rest. And he gives him 25 milligrams of the drug. And he says it's quite small, a dose. And by 10:50, Jackson is unconscious, and Murray says he monitors him except for 2 minutes for a bathroom break. When he returns, Michael Jackson is not breathing, but phone records tell a different story because at 11:18 a.m., there's a 32-minute call to his Las Vegas office, then a 3-minute call to a patient, and then an 11-minute call to a colleague in Houston. So 47 minutes on the phone while his patient is unconscious under this drug with no monitoring equipment.
Wow. Okay. Can I assume that when this all goes to shit, because this is one of the most famous people in the world, and there is this very expensive concert that's on the line that hasn't gone ahead, someone's head has to roll. And this sounds like it is the perfect scapegoat Potentially. I don't know, but it's the perfect person to go after and blame.
Yeah, whether he's trying to save his own ass or trying to get help, what should he do? But what's clear is that there's a period of time which isn't fully explained actually what happens.
Yeah, and he's saying that I was monitoring him, but no, you weren't. You were talking on the phone to a patient.
Because at 12:17 p.m., a bodyguard enters the room and he later testifies that Murray is frantic. According to the bodyguard, Murray begins grabbing vials from the nightstand, telling him, put these in a bag, an IV bag, which is milky white, which is consistent with the drug that he's just given him. Items are concealed, and only then does Murray instruct him to call 911 when he's cleared off some of the evidence.
So he's covering his tracks. He knows that Michael has died, and now he's... Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So a call is placed at 12:21 p.m. A 50-year-old man is reported as not breathing. The dispatcher asks, is he on a bed? And he is. And they say, oh, you need to move him onto the floor because performing CPR on a mattress, it basically absorbs the force. It renders it null, essentially.
Oh, wow. That's good advice, actually.
Paramedics arrive pretty quickly. They find him on the bed, briefly moved back again. There's an IV in his leg. And at this point, there's very little time left. His body is already cooling. Paramedic Richard Sennell notes immediately that his skin is cold to touch. His pupils are fixed and dilated. And based on that alone, he estimates something critical, that at least 20 minutes since cardiac arrest. And yet there is still information missing. Murray does not tell paramedics about the propofol. He does not tell the emergency room doctors either.
Vital information that could potentially have saved him.
Exactly. That is one of the most important pieces of information he should have shared.
But then whose life is on the line here? I'm not saying I'm not excusing it. I'm trying to understand why he wouldn't, because, of course, he's going to get in trouble.
Yeah, he's saving his ass. So they continue to try and resuscitate him at the house and then in the ambulance. They get Michael to a hospital and doctors continue working for over an hour. Every possible intervention is tried, but at 2:26 p.m. on June the 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson is pronounced dead at 50 years old.
Wow. I remember that day. I remember it coming up on the news.
Did you know it only took 20 minutes before the news to leak of his death?
From the hospital. It doesn't surprise me because he is the most famous person in the world.
I think TMZ broke it,
Really?
Actually, yeah. So within minutes, the internet begins to collapse. Everyone's online. There's all these tweets about him being dead. And the following day, the autopsy is performed and the cause of death is acute propofol intoxication with contributing benzodiazepines, which are all the pans.
All the marzipan, yeah.
In simple terms, the propofol killed him and everything else made it easier for him to die. And his body was just 5'9", 136 pounds at the time of his death. He had vitiligo. That was confirmed, the condition he had spoken about publicly.
Case rested.
Yeah, case rested.
Proved.
It's proved.
It's not a conspiracy, guys.
They do say his heart was healthy and his organs were functioning. He had no cancer or terminal illness, which was what some people reported.
So what you're saying is that without the drugs, he would have been fine.
Exactly. And so ultimately, it's not his body failing. It was the people around him failing him. Because Conrad Murray is charged in 2010 with involuntary manslaughter, not murder, even though investigators believe the evidence could support that. And the trial begins in 2011 and it lasts 6 weeks. And the prosecution lays it out simply that a doctor administering a surgical anesthetic in a private home, no monitoring equipment, no emergency protocol, and a delay in dialing 911 and concealing evidence. The defense do argue that Jackson gave himself propofol. And
really?
that he was a desperate addict and it was an accident, not criminal negligence or anything like that. But Murray is sentenced to 4 years in county jail. That's the maximum he could get.
That was the maximum that he could get, and he got the full maximum.
I think he serves about half of that because of overcrowding.
Oh, okay. Shit.
Yeah. Afterwards, Murray does publish a memoir titled This Is It, framing himself not as responsible, but as the scapegoat. No remorse, no accountability, and that's where the criminal case ends.
Really? But also how sickening is that he uses This Is It for the title of his book, trying to capitalize on all of that. And I think to me that shows that, he's
a money grabber.
Yeah.
Then on a second trial, this one isn't criminal, it's a civil case, but Michael's mother, Catherine Jackson, files a wrongful death lawsuit against AEG Live.
Interesting.
And she tries to do it for, I think, almost $2 billion. And the case lasts 5 months, 58 witnesses. And the question at the center of it isn't necessarily what happened, it's the responsibility. Did AEG hire Murray? Did they control him? Did they supervise him?
Oh, so it's all revolving around Murray.
And did they ultimately put an unqualified, financially desperate doctor in charge of Michael Jackson's life?
Someone with all the incentive to, A, make sure that Michael gets onto that stage.
Exactly.
But also, Michael is culpable in this as well. Because if Michael turned around and said, I do not like this physician, they would have replaced the physician.
Well, he's got a physician that would give him drugs.
Yes.
Ultimately.
Exactly.
So, yeah, there is that element. I think
if
we need
it
to
wasn't
understand.
Murray, it would have been another physician in this position.
I think so, yeah. There's also all the emails where people had recognized that Jackson was deteriorating. He wasn't himself, but they were still pushing for the tour to go live. So I think the fact is there isn't this due diligence.
It's money.
If the show stops, the money stops, and that's bad news for both Murray and AEG. And then something else came out, a testimony from Prince Jackson, 15 years old at the time.
Wow.
He says his father would often get these phone calls from executives, and he'd cry and he'd say, like, they're going to kill me. So I don't know, again, is that the paranoia? But I think he just felt this pressure from these managers to continue.
Yeah, no. And I kind of read that in a different way. Like, because my mum would say it all the time, these kids are going to be the death of me. It's saying it in that way. And I'm wondering if they keep pushing me and they keep wanting me to do things that I just don't feel like I've got the strength to do it. And I think it's said in that kind of context. But to overhear that regardless.
Your dad saying that.
Yeah. It's suggesting that they are asking for a lot from me when I'm telling them that I don't have the energy or the strength. Wow.
Ultimately, the court and the jury rule that AEG was not liable and the case is closed. And AEG, they still make a fortune from the documentary, the merchandise, the tickets, because half the fans don't refund their tickets. They keep them as souvenirs. The film comes out, and in it, the Jackson brothers reunite to record backing vocals for one of the songs.
Really?
It's filled with all the rehearsal footage and some of the final performances. And like I say, it grossed 267 million worldwide. And what you see in the footage is undeniable. Michael Jackson, he still has it. He's still one of the best in the world.
But just like glimmers of it.
His own bodyguards say something that sticks, that Michael wasn't afraid of fans. He wasn't afraid of strangers. He was afraid of the people around him, the lawyers, the managers, the system, essentially, that he was inside. And that's sort of what's frustrating, because there's never a clean answer, just a lot of conspiracy about what happened and what went on. And also, his death wasn't inevitable, at least at this point in time. It was preventable. A man in visible decline, physically, mentally, still being pushed forward, and a doctor who should never have been there, and a system that didn't stop it, and people didn't protect him.
But I just feel like you're trying to absolve him from any culpability here. Like Michael Jackson, without him, he wouldn't have been this dependent on these drugs.
That is true. Obviously, he does have a hand in bringing Murray along with him. It was his choice. And I think it's, regardless of whether he is a paedophile or not, I think just at this point in time, there is a little bit of a tragic way in terms of his final few days. He wasn't looked after. Some people might say he deserved it at the end of the day because of maybe he wasn't a nice person. I don't know. I'm just looking at it from both sides, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, the record shows that he was acquitted of all charges, which was surprising to me. I didn't realize that was the case.
12 days after his death, there's a memorial, and it's held at 17,500 tickets. It draws loads of people and a global audience of people wanting to pay their last respects. Stevie Wonder, Mariah Carey, Usher were there, and Jennifer Hudson sang. Brooke Shield talks about the boy she grew up with. There's all this really nice kind of remembrance about who Michael was.
Yeah.
And then Paris Jackson, at just 11 years old, steps forward and she says that ever since I was born, Daddy has always been the best father. And she can't even finish her sentence. She just breaks down.
Shame.
So I think that's something that I think we often forget. We talk about, is he a monster? We forget that he is a dad at this point, and he's got really young kids that have to listen to all these allegations about their father. I don't know, what is their life like?
It's all very true, and it makes us all very complex.
Michael is buried in September 2009. And for a while, that's where the story rests. Life moves on, and his legacy is remembered largely quite fondly. That is until a decade later, because in 2019, at Sundance Film Festival, a documentary premieres called Leaving Neverland.
Ah, yes, I remember this. Awful documentary.
Yeah, it lands hard and it's devastating, in fact. It does win Primetime Emmy Awards, but as a result, radio stations are forced to pull Michael's music based on some of the revelations that are revealed in the documentary.
Wow.
Even The Simpsons removes an episode featuring his voice because everyone turns on Michael. I think this is probably the biggest shift to people going, actually, this isn't right. We need to actually stand up here.
Can you remind me of the key people that were in the documentary? I know it focused on a couple of the boys that claimed that they were sexually abused and they went through their testimony. But was it some of the names that we've already mentioned?
Yeah. So there's a guy we haven't spoken about, James Safechuck, but there's another guy, Wade Robson.
Ah, you told me. Put a pin in that.
And yeah, we're now taking the pin out.
So what has he said now? Because initially you said at the trial,
Yeah,
he testified, twice, essentially, that nothing had ever happened.
That's right.
But now in this documentary, what's he saying?
Well, both boys had met Michael Jackson when they were young. So we're talking about the late 80s. I think even James himself, he got to be in a commercial with him. So they were quite privileged. In 1991, Wade moves to Los Angeles with his mother and sister. He's just 8, and he starts working with Michael, appearing in Black or White, Jam, Heal the World. So he's not just a fan, he's actually part of it.
Yeah, and he is trying to make it, showbiz, isn't he?
And then fast forward to 2005, at the Gavin Arvizo trial, we had Wade Robson. He was 22 years at the time, and under oath say that clearly nothing ever happened between him and Michael. James doesn't testify at that trial. He'll later say that he felt pressure not to, but at the time, the defense actually never called for him. And for years after this, both of them had publicly defended Michael Jackson. Wade attends the memorial and speaks about him with admiration, but then Wade auditions for Cirque du Soleil, a Michael Jackson show, and it's a huge role, and it's a chance to honor Michael's legacy, but he doesn't get cast. And at this point, he's 30 years old, and he later says he's struggling financially, personally, and then what he describes as a mental breakdown. And it's here that everything changes, because Wade now says that during this period, he realized he was abused. Not just once, but over years between the ages of 7 and 14. Now, both Wade and James recount that what happened in the documentary, Jackson had allegedly groomed them and their families and built trust with the parents to gain access. And the abuse occurred in multiple locations, at Neverland, in hotels. And in the documentary, their account is really quite extreme.
It's really graphic, isn't it?
Very horrific, yeah. And I'm not going to go into the details, but they are very descriptive of what happened.
I think the shocking element is that they describe elements of abuse within elements that are very deep-rooted in childhood. So they talk about this horrific stuff that's happened, all while there is a cardboard cutout of Peter Pan or Tinkerbell at the bottom of the bed.
Yeah.
And that's the shocking element of it. It's this very close intertwining of those two things that should be very separate at all times. And I think that's what made that shocking.
Yeah, and anyone watching this can't help but feel sympathy for these poor men because of what they're saying. Michael Jackson is a monster.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember watching the documentary, albeit a long time ago, and some of the ways that I believe it was the boy who had moved to LA, because it was quite theatrical, quite musical and stuff. And the way that he was describing the abuse just made so much sense to me, because he was just saying it very candidly, but he was like, Michael Jackson would think about where we would do stuff, and we would lock ourselves away in specific rooms because he knew that if someone was coming, it would be open one door, open the next door, and we would be notified that someone was coming. And that's the kind of detail that you wouldn't just make up. Do you know what I mean? And that's the thing that stood out to him.
I think people take these allegations seriously, which is why there's this backlash against Michael.
It was very damning.
And they can't sue Michael Jackson. Obviously, he's dead, but they do sue his companies or the estate. And the argument was someone should be held responsible for letting that happen.
So his estate should be held responsible.
Maybe not his estate, but the management. Because I guess there's a duty of care to these boys when they're around this celebrity. If they knew that this was happening, they let it happen. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't necessarily agree with it. To me, you want justice, But surely if he had done this, you'd want justice from him, but he is dead. And so who are you coming after? You're coming after the management. And I don't necessarily think management changes all the time, right? The same people that was operating Michael's estate today aren't the same people that were operating the estate back then.
That's very true, yeah. However, one thing is that the defense wanted access to Wade Robson's emails.
Interesting.
And he fought hard to prevent that and tried to keep them private.
Is it because he would have been found out to be lying under oath, therefore perjury?
Well, when those emails came out, what it showed was some inconsistencies, once again, in Wade Robson's story. There were multiple versions of the same story, emails between Wade and his mother, going back and forth, refining details, changing timelines. And in one exchange, Wade sends her an article making claims about Michael, and she replies, that never happened. And yet that exact claim ends up in her testimony under oath. And it's at this point the credibility issue rears its surface once again.
Sure, the second he comes forward and says, actually, I was molested, that is a credibility issue, regardless of what's been said and what they found later on, right? Because he did say under oath that it didn't happen. It sounds like it's collusion, right? And you said he got to 30, he hadn't made it in Hollywood. And so, again, you painted this picture of someone who has something to gain.
Yeah, and that's not to say that trauma can't resurface later in life. People react to it differently.
And your interpretation of abuse can change over the years. When you do get to 30, if he does have kids, and then you look back and you go, would I want this to have happened? At the time, I was unaffected by it. But now that I've got kids, would I want my kids to go through this? And the answer could be different.
But then a lot of people, after watching the documentary, have gone back through both Wade Robson and James Safechuck's claims, and they've spotted holes in their stories too.
Really?
Enough that it actually affected the documentary itself, because the original HBO version was over 230 minutes. But when it aired in the UK, it was trimmed down to 189 minutes.
Because of contradictions.
Well, the producers say it's just a trim for different broadcasters, ads, things like that. But what the viewers had noticed is that certain claims in the original version don't appear in the UK version. So immediately people are asking questions like, well, if you pulled that, then you either knew that wasn't right or you now realize you can't now use that in your documentary.
Sure. Could it also be, correct me if I'm wrong, the libel laws in the UK are way stricter?
Potentially, yeah.
And so to protect themselves from potential scrutiny, they thought it's easier for us to just keep this out because someone could potentially come and sue us, and it's a lot easier to win a libel case in the UK.
It didn't come up in what I researched, but that is plausible for sure. But I think, again, which is inconsistent, is that Wade at one point says that in 2005, when he gave that testimony under oath, that he already knew at that point and understood what had happened to him. But then he was 22 at the time, and he then says later that it was when he was 30 that he then realized what had happened to him. He also had protected Michael, but then he says, we felt sorry for his children, and he didn't want their father to go to prison. It was all just a very messy web.
And that's the thing, though. Like, there could be truth in there, but as soon as you tarnish your story with inconsistencies or testimonies under oath, I'm sorry, you may have been abused. It's so now difficult to even prove either way because you set out on one path to begin with and you've changed later on.
I think that's the thing, that all these cases that we're spoken about today, like, I find it hard to fully side with them because of these other allegations. And maybe that's the defense team doing a really good job at like just picking holes and making that like the forefront of what we're being told. But, I think he could be a pedophile. But I don't think these cases prove that at the moment.
Yes, correct. I can't necessarily make up my mind either way. And hey, maybe the way that the defense has maybe managed to kind of like put doubt in your mind, I think they've been very successful in that because I'm on the fence.
Yeah, and I think the same thing happened with like James. He says that some of the abuse happened at the train station in Neverland. I think it was in 1994. His timelines don't add up when he said the abuse happened. The train station wasn't even built at that point. And yes, you can get your timelines wrong, but he was quite clear and specific about that.
Sure.
Then there's another pattern. People are coming forward with offers or incentives to get people to speak out against Michael. Some of his own security team have been approached, not to accuse him directly, but to imply or suggest that something may have happened. They're offered money to comment on these stories. So it's not proof or truth. It's just a story that sells because Michael Jackson and scandal is, well, it's gold in terms of news.
Sure. Yeah, no, I get that. That's a very good assessment of it. The second there's a sniff or something dodgy going on that is able to resurface all of this stuff, it's going to sell because he is one of the most famous people in the world. But also, people are out there going, I'd really like to get to the bottom of this. And so when there's anything that's in the paper, they could think, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the smoking gun that disproves or proves.
Yeah, and you got people that take advantage of that because they want money. They want to leverage their own sort of personal interest. But then you got people like Aaron Carter, in fact, that said that his mother even tried to get him to accuse Michael for money. And he's in a hotel room with FBI agents and she's going, go on, tell him that he molested you. And he's like, what are you talking about, Mum? That never happened.
Wow.
So it's crazy, isn't it? As these parents, some of them with this agenda, but equally, is it these kids that don't really understand what happened to them? I don't know.
You don't know. Thanks for fucking it all up for me.
And from there, both of the cases for Wade and James, they hit a wall. So when you step back and look at everything, a few things become clear. The FBI looked into Michael Jackson for years and no evidence of abuse that ever went to trial, ever found him guilty. And that matters because Wade Robson, James Safechuck both said in the 90s that nothing happened. So the question becomes, why would Michael call people he was abusing to defend him in court? And why would he risk them speaking out at all? And then their stories change, not once, but multiple times.
That's a good point.
And of course, Michael's supposed honesty that he did, in fact, sleep in a bed with a child, and he didn't see the problem, which is what makes this difficult because that doesn't look like someone trying to cover something up. It looks like someone who doesn't understand how it's perceived, or is it someone that's hiding in plain sight?
Yeah.
Some see innocence, naivety, a damaged person trying to recreate a childhood that he never had. And others see something far darker. And the truth is, you can understand both sides, but the lifestyles, the choices, and the environment, you can't shake the feeling that something just wasn't right. And so, for me, where does that leave it? In 2017, courts ruled that Michael Jackson's companies could not be held responsible for his alleged actions. There was no evidence these companies controlled him or had a legal duty to protect anyone from him.
That's what I said.
Which seems wrong in my eyes because I feel like there could be someone that was complicit in covering things up. But further documentaries have emerged offering different narratives. Even commercially, the reaction is a bit complicated because album sales, they still go on and some stations have added his music back into the playlists. Mm-hmm. So the audience hasn't fully turned away. And even now it isn't over because this year there's some long-standing civil cases that are due to go to trial.
Wow, in 2025.
2026, Kyle.
In 2026.
So even now, we haven't seen the end of this saga.
And that's the thing, like with every case, with every person that comes forward, with every testimony, with every speculation, with every theory, it only makes the truth even harder to get at.
Yeah, and even though some of the claims in the past might have been weak or fabricated,
it's still out there.
It's
still out there muddying the thing.
It doesn't mean that other people coming forward are lying. And if anyone has been abused, it makes them coming forward probably more difficult because they probably think they're not going to be believed or they're just going to be held under such scrutiny, or maybe they did this one thing wrong in their past and then, it's going to be wiped out.
Yeah, or you misremember one little tiny detail.
Exactly. And so one final thing I will say, it is estimated that Michael Jackson's estate earned $105 million in pre-tax earnings between October 2024 and September 2025 alone.
Wow.
He is the highest earning deceased celebrity ever. And whoever is in charge of that, you're going to make sure his reputation is protected one way or another.
Sneaky bitch. With that little line at the end. Wow, that is food for thought, that one.
And that is the conclusion of Michael Jackson, part 2 of Testimonies, Trials, and Controversy.
Wow. You've definitely shifted the needle to inconclusive for me. I don't know. I think I was convinced that he did it.
I don't think we should be so sympathetic that we go like, oh, it didn't happen.
Sure. Correct.
But I just think there's so much in these stories that I don't think are well known.
Sure.
That you just have to look at them differently.
Yeah. And again, that's the other thing. There is so much that you can lean one way until someone says, but X, Y, and Z. And then you go, that's true. You start leaning the other way. And then someone goes, X, Y, and Z. And you go, so you just don't know. And I think the safest bet is that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And the middle is very complicated.
Yeah.
You've got one of the biggest stars in the world that people want to capitalize on and take advantage of. You've got this incredible personality that is extremely damaged and extremely a product of his background and his upbringing. And within that is a very complex psyche where it's very plausible from what we know of Michael Jackson that he could 100% legitimately believe that he is a young boy. And so sharing a bed with another young boy is just like having a sleepover. That is very plausible to me.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. And it's one of those things that, yeah, his music is so good. You want to listen to his music.
Sure. I think for me, it's easy with the music. Like, I'm never not going to not like his music. If I like one of his songs, that doesn't really play a factor in for me. But then at the same time, it's because I'm still undecided. If I 100% knew without a doubt that he was responsible for molesting a bunch of kids, I probably wouldn't listen to his music.
That's a very good point, actually.
And that's not dismissing anything. I think if I do have enough information, I would pick a side. So yeah, what an incredible saga, Adam.
It was a saga.
Yeah, your first double-parter. I wonder how that's going to be received. 3 weeks of Adam on the trot.
Yeah. Are you still listening out there?
Do you fancy doing some member shout-outs?
Let's do it. So this is the part of the show where we remind you that the Compendium, we're not just a podcast, we're a circus. We are an inclusive company with rights and benefits and
policies
and just having a jolly good time.
So make sure you guys head over to the Compendium podcast and click the jobs tab in the footer where you can browse through our growing collection of bizarre and suspiciously specific, deeply bureaucratic circus roles.
All of which are fake, of course.
Yes, they are.
But they sound really fun.
They do. You guys can pick your favorite role, apply for it, and then tell us exactly what you do in your position day to day.
And we want the gory details. Not necessarily gory. We just want to know what your duties are, what incidents you've had to deal with. Have you had to mop up sick? Who's underperforming? Has someone let Esmeralda out again?
The bearded lady. Each week, we'll pick our favorite submission and read it out on the show, which means that it's now time to put the spotlight firmly on this week's glorious employee, who is Eliza Gillingham, the Ringmaster Gesture Standardization Reviewer.
Okay.
She's here to keep me in check.
Oh, yeah.
That is her job. Eliza was hired as a Ringmaster Gesture Standardization Reviewer, a role created to bring order, consistency, plausible deniability to the Ringmaster's physical communication across rings, tents, and unexpected pop-up spectacles.
What does that mean?
Trying to stop me from getting sued. Basically.
She has got her work cut out.
She has. Eliza's remit includes defining, documenting, auditing, and when necessary, quietly intervening in the use of gestures such as pointing, presenting, beckoning, silencing, and legally sensitive come closer swells. You know this one.
Yeah. Get over here.
Her salary is $50,000 a year, plus unlimited popcorn. That's the perk.
That's a good perk.
In a crisis, she is more likely to make it worse, but with confidence. And her favorite host is that she could never choose. That's nice.
Right answer.
Would you like to read her day-to-day responsibilities?
Yes. So she says that she serves as Ringmaster Gesture Standardization Reviewer, reportedly directing to the Senior Ringmaster. Her daily responsibilities include auditing, evaluating, and occasionally intervening in the use of Ringmaster gestures. Her stated aim is to ensure all gestures remain clear, authoritative, and circus appropriate, while avoiding anything even vaguely adjacent to aircraft signaling.
Nope. That's on the line.
Because at one time this plane crashed.
Right into the tent.
In terms of major incidents and near misses or cover-ups, she says there was the jazz hands containment event where she said that she loves jazz hands and she believes in jazz hands and respects jazz hands. However, she clarifies that jazz hands are not a transactional gesture and cannot under any circumstances be used to conclude a segment unless the segment is in fact jazz.
Amazing. So she likes jazz, but there's no place for it in the circus.
Unless it is jazz.
Unless it's jazz.
And then the over-enthusiastic and now extension, a gesture escalated in both volume and arm span, created what Eliza described as an almost evangelical level of energy.
Nice.
The matter was resolved through breathwork and a reminder that grandeur need not require wind resistance.
This is brilliant.
Eliza has confirmed that all incidents were handled with passion, precision, and a laminated guideline sheet she absolutely made for herself.
I love a laminate. Like, babe, we're kindred spirits here.
She rates her overall performance as exceeds expectations enthusiastically, and she reports that gesture clarity remains high. Jazz hands are contained, but not extinguished. Most importantly, no segments have accidentally transitioned into interpretive dance this quarter, and she adds that she continues to balance wonder with structure and drama with discipline, and notes that these leadership skills also serve her well in the Parent-Teacher Association. Eliza also wishes it to be known that she listens to the compendium through one earbud and never missed an episode even during high-stakes gesture review.
Aw, thanks, Eliza. She's one of our biggest fans.
Final statement, standards matter, so does razzle dazzle.
It does, it really does.
Brilliant.
And Eliza has actually included a photograph on her application, which means that she automatically got added to the teams page. So there she is in a beautiful top hat.
Nice one,
Nice.
Eliza.
Yeah, brilliant. Guys, so if you want to be featured on a future episode, then remember, head over to the Compendium Podcast and click Jobs in the footer, and you can go ahead and send us your application. We will read the best ones on a future episode.
Brilliant. So shall we run the outro?
Let's do it.
And that brings us to the end of another fascinating foray into the compendium, an assembly of fascinating things.
If today's episode has sparked your curiosity, then please do us a favor and add us on your favorite podcasting app. It really does make a world of difference and helps other people like you find the show.
And for our dedicated freaks out there, don't forget next week's episode is already waiting for you on our Patreon, completely free to access.
And if you want even more, then join our Certified Freaks tier and unlock our entire archive, get exclusive content, and get a sneak peek of what's coming next. We want you to be part of our growing community.
We drop new episodes every Tuesday, so until then, just because you read it in a magazine or see it on the TV screen, don't make it factual.
What is that?
It's another one of his songs.
Oh, is it? Very good. See you next time.
See ya.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.